Thanks everyone for joining us today. In our previous episode, we started on an exploration into the fascinating intersection of neuroscience and spirituality with Dr. Ashish Pradhan, who is a distinguished leader in neurology and cardiovascular medicine, renowned for his cutting-edge work and strategic leadership in patient-centric care. And he emphasized the importance of understanding the complexities of the nervous system as a foundation for exploring the spiritual aspects of being human. And Dr. Pradhan also talked to us about the brain's evolutionary journey, highlighting the fascinating adaptations that have shaped its structure and function. And today, we welcome all of you to this second episode of our enlightening series with the esteemed Dr. Ashish Pradhan. And today, we're taking this exploration even deeper. So get ready for another thought-provoking conversation as we continue to bridge the worlds of science and spirituality. Welcome, Dr. Pradhan.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, Golikaji. Happy to be back.
And we definitely, look forward to learning a lot with you in this yet another episode. So, Dr. Pradhan, like I said, in our previous episode, we delved into the intricate workings of the human nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and their connections to our spiritual experiences. And you also distinguished between, the parasympathetic, the sympathetic, and explained how they interact to maintain balance, regulate essential functions, etc. But today, we would like to know how the autonomic nervous system intertwines with the concept of the human subtle system that you briefly mentioned, and how they influence our spiritual well-being.
Sure. So let's get started right away. It's a slightly complex topic. We'll try to understand this as best as we can. At the very outset, I would just like to once again say that whatever we present today, whatever we discuss in response to your questions, a lot of that knowledge comes from the teachings of Srimati Nirmala Devi, the founder of Sahaja Yoga meditation, and intertwined, of course, and with what we know about human anatomy and physiology. So let's get started. Before we try to understand how the autonomic nervous system and the subtle system sort of are correlated or interact, let's take a step back and see what constitutes the subtle system, if you will, and from there we can proceed towards our understanding of the autonomic nervous system. So the so-called human subtle system, as you would be able to see in the animation, the viewers would be able to see it, essentially comprises nadis. Nadis it's a Sanskrit word, and the word can have multiple meanings. It can mean nerves, it can mean channels, it can mean tubes, it can mean blood vessels, it can mean lymphatics, it can mean a whole host of things. It's almost like one word or like a noun for a collective, for a whole host of individual things within the body. Now this essentially comes from, this knowledge was described, or this system was described in most detail in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now this is a very ancient Sanskrit text, and what you have in that system, what you have in those texts, is a description of this subtle anatomy and physiology within the human body, within the human system. What the subtle system is actually, if we step even one step further or kind of step behind, is actually a reflection within us of the macrocosm. So what do we mean? What we have within us is the microcosm. What exists outside of us, of course, is the macrocosm. And within the macrocosm, if we look at how things sort of function, there is a system of balance. Light and dark, heavy and light, dry and wet, fire and ice. So those are naturally occurring phenomenon that are present in nature. It has also been described, let's say, we spiritually or metaphorically refer to it as yin and yang. So just as there is daylight, there is night. There is the sun, there is the moon. You have high tide, you have low tide, so on and so forth. You have summer and spring, you have fall and winter. So in nature, essentially, we have a balance. And either of, of systems that, if they are overactive, can trigger an imbalance. So in other words, if we have too much heat, that isn't good for the system. If there's too much cold, it isn't good for system, for the system in general. So ecology or ecosystems or the universal constants that we see around us is a very good way to begin to sort of get an understanding of what the human subtle system is about. So now to sort of slowly start coming into the details and trying to answer your question, as the human being evolved, or as the Homo sapien evolved, as we discussed the last time, the nervous system was an adaptation to evolutionary pressures. And those evolutionary pressures essentially engendered basically two broad systems of phenomenon from a Darwinian point of view. The first one was the fight or the flight response. The fight or flight response comes into play if there is a threat to the organism in the environment, and then it leads to what Darwin called as natural selection, or it brings down pressure upon the system or upon the species to take or to adapt such characteristics that allows it to thrive in the environment. So either it can overcome the danger, a smaller fish sort of basically says it could be gobbled by a bigger fish, so maybe needs to develop more sensory organs, a faster fin, faster sort of reflexes. Similarly, a gazelle on the Serengeti plains needs to develop responses to kind of run away from the lion that might pursue it. So those are flight or fight responses that of course are part of the evolutionary mechanism. So the subtle system essentially comprises two aspects to it. One is a passive aspect, another is the so-called active aspect. So we see that even in the cosmos around us, things are dynamic and sometimes they are passive, both at the same time, and it's not a contradiction. The whole system through immutable laws, and we call them the laws of divinity, the laws of the Almighty, call it what you will, to each his own, but basically the system works in a function, in a state of balance. So likewise in the human body, therefore now to start coming down back to the point, is we have a system which is sort of the passive system, we have a system which is the active system. On the left side, so to speak, we call it the moon channel, or we call it the Ida Nadi. On the right side, we call it the sun channel, or we call it the Pingala Nadi. The left side or the moon channel is more passive, it allows passivity, but passivity that doesn't mean sloth or lethargy. It can get into it if it is overactive. Similarly, on the right side, we have the ability to act, to bring our desires into fruition. But again, if that becomes overactive, that becomes a problem too. We can become aggressive, overthinking, overplanning, that sort of a thing. So within the human body, the subtle system has these two components. They are called nadis, and that's how it functions. Now, back to once again to the evolutionary component. Within the evolutionary system, as we said, there is a flight or fight pressures, but there is also the need to evolve. The need to evolve into a higher state, both at a physical, but as well as at a cognitive or at a nervous system level, or at a neural level. And that is how we described during the last session, how the brain evolved in response to some of these pressures. So likewise, in the subtle system, there is a third component, the so-called Sushumna Nadi. And that is a kind of the power that allows evolution to sort of proceed. We know how these changes are brought about through genetic changes that are passed on from the offspring, passed on to the offspring from the parent, that has allowed it to survive. So these are the three components to summarize of the subtle system. You have on the left side the passive side, the so-called Ida Nadi. On the right side, the so-called sun channel, the active side or the Pingala Nadi. And in the center, we have a power that allows evolution, but evolution in a spiritual sense. Now, the microcosm is reflected in the macrocosm, and now we come to the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system also has these two components. One is the sympathetic nervous system, the other is the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system governs your flight or fight responses. Similarly, for example, you see a danger, a human being sees a danger, either he or she wants to fight or to run away from it. That triggers your heart rate to either pump faster, maybe run away from the danger. So that's one. The other is the evolutionary or the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is your rest and digest kind of a system. It allows the individual to repose, to relax, and to nourish. So, the left and the right, sort of the subtle systems or the sympathetic system, are something that are energy expending systems. They consume energy, they expend energy. We either consume energy in our desires by having desires, or we consume energy bringing those desires into action. The parasympathetic nervous system allows us to rest and to nourish ourselves, and in that way, through mechanisms that we have not yet biologically elucidated, allow us to evolve. I'll stop there. I hope that kind of answers the question, but I'm happy to take more questions if that did not fully explain it.
Well, thanks, Dr. Ashish, for that explanation. And as we continue to kind of zoom into the subtle system, after having understood a bit about, these energy channels or these nadis, we would like to understand from you a little bit about the plexus now. So how is a plexus formed? What role do plexus play in the functioning of the human body? Things of that nature, if you can explain to the audiences.
Sure. So a plexus is essentially it's derived from the Latin word, it has its origins in Latin, and it essentially means a braid, like a braid of hair, for example, like when women who have the hair, longer hair, or even men or women, if you tie that in a braid, that's the word that's the origin of it. That's how it looks. Now, why is it called a plexus? We saw last time that the central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord, and the spinal cord, through the spinal cord, which passes through the vertebral column, you have nerves that come out of the vertebra from the sides, right? When the nerves come out from the vertebra, they essentially kind of come together from different parts, and the plexus is like, you might say, if you open the electrical box in your house, you see a bunch of wires kind of coming together. So a plexus is like nature's way of organizing the nerves that come out. And these nerves, as we know, go further out and they enter the various organs of the body. So whether it is the heart, whether it is the lungs, whether it is the stomach, the pancreas, the liver, whatever. So these, and also of course the skeletal musculature. So these nerves, when they come out, they kind of bunch together, they kind of come together, and that is what is called a plexus. Now, a plexus basically is from a Sahaj point of view, is the gross manifestation of what we call as energy centers or chakras within the body. So again, the Yoga Sutras have described 7 principal energy centers. So there are multiple other centers as well, but there are 7 energy centers that start from something that is below our vertebral column, right up the way, right into up to the crown of our head. So the idea here is, or the hypothesis is, that the energy center itself exists at a very, very subtle level within the human body. The energy center or the chakra cannot be easily actually be seen through any current means of diagnostic techniques, for example, MRI scans or functional MRI scans or CT scans. You cannot put something in and try to see it functionally, nor can you dissect the body at a level where you see it, because these energy centers function or exist at the plane of energy. It is not matter per se, it is energy. And these energy centers at specific parts of the human body govern the functioning of these nerve centers we call plexuses. So the energy flow is from the energy center to the plexus, and from the plexus it goes through the nerves into the organs. So that is how the energy, the chakra basically, or the energy center, governs the functioning of the human body in the autonomic nervous system. That in essence is the schema. So you have the energy center that has the energy, that in a way quote unquote controls, have to use hand quote here because there is no real neurotransmittery sort of system as we discussed last time. There is no acetylcholine, there is no adrenaline, there is no dopamine or serotonin that essentially does it. But through ways that we have not yet elucidated, but you can feel it through your awareness once you practice this form of meditation, that the energy basically flows from the energy center to the plexus, from the plexus to the organ, and that is how the chakra plexus organ system sort of functions to maintain once again the balance in the body, the internal ecosystem of the body. That's how the nadis and the chakras kind of come together. It's very important to remember as we go in our journey, and we discuss this in the future episodes, that we should avoid the trap that modern medicine has fallen into, which is to look at individual components and then try to make a sense of the whole. To understand the human spiritual system or the subtle system, one needs to take, in fact, the directly opposite approach, which is a holistic approach, to start from understanding that the system functions in an integrated fashion. And to try to break it down into its components in a way is a reductive approach. But at the same time, it does help to understand a little bit, but that's how it essentially functions. So even if one chakra kind of controls maybe in theory one plexus, in reality it probably controls many more plexuses and functions in ways that are very complex that human understanding still not has been able to fathom. I'll stop there. I hope that provided some perspective of why the plexus is so important to understand within the concept, or the broader concept of human spirituality.
And thanks, Dr. Ashish, for that understanding, because all along I always thought that chakra, energy center, and plexus are all the same things. And, I know we use these terms without knowing so much about them, but thanks for explaining that. But now, if you can talk to us about the hypothesis that underlies the relationship between a chakra and a plexus, and why is it important for us to understand that?
Excellent. So the chakra basically is, from a Sahaj point of view, the seat of divine power. It has expressed itself as pure love, and each of these energy centers or chakras, they manifest different qualities. And it is the governing of each of the, through the energy center, that is the chakra, the energy that is transmitted to the plexus essentially governs the functioning of that particular organ system, or organs that are kind of within the remit of that plexus. So as we'll see as we move along, there are specific plexuses that look after specific organs. Now the reason why this is important is to understand both the physiology and the pathology. The physiology is very simple, as we just expressed. Energy transmitted to the plexus, and therefore the functioning of the organ system. Equally important, if the energy center is overused, there is a finite amount of energy that is present at each of the individual chakra levels when an individual takes birth, and throughout our life we keep on expending that energy that we are born with, unless and until you get into a state we call self-realization, and then that energy can be replenished. But for most individuals, from the time of their birth till we pass on, there's a limited amount of energy. If that energy is not used in a wise and an optimal manner, then it places strain on that chakra. That strain is then reflected at the level of the plexus because there is an imbalance, right? The key to understanding everything is balance of this ecosystem. And if that plexus gets into a state of imbalance, quote unquote, this is not, medicine doesn't easily explain this, but at the spiritual level we can explain it through our growth in our self-awareness through Sahaj. If the plexus gets imbalanced, then the organ systems it governs get imbalanced as well. Which, in other words, what do we mean by imbalance? Imbalance implies the beginning of a pathological state, which may or may not be easily detectable, but it starts at a very subtle level, and then over a period of time it manifests as gross pathology. And that is why it's important to understand the governance structure from the energy center, that is the chakra, to the plexus, to the organ system.
Doctor, from what you mentioned, it seems like there has to be a wise use of the finite energy that we are born with. If you can help us understand, what does it mean to use that energy wisely or discreetly so that we don't get our chakras out of balance?
Exactly. So, for example, let's take an example of the heart chakra. Okay, the one that governs the cardiac plexus and our cardiovascular system, but basically the cardiac system. So, for example, if we overwork, if we overstrain ourselves, we know that we are pursuing something. Maybe it's a career opportunity. We want to work, and everybody wants to get ahead in life, and that's okay. But the question is your ambition, is your drive putting you in a place where you can actually feel that you are under stress? And that stress at some point in a way is manifesting in the form of essential hypertension, right? Your systolic is going up, your diastolic is going up at certain age or whatever as the case may be. Then that knowingly doing it or continuing to do it is being unwise about it, because now we should know. Now, most people don't have knowledge about the chakras, but they do understand blood pressure or hypertension, because that potentially it's a silent thing. But if you get the symptoms and if you're diagnosed with it, that's different. So this is what we mean by being wise about it. That whatever your drives in life, whatever your desires, wisdom, which is again an innate quality that comes to us from the first energy center, which we shall be talking about shortly, needs to manifest itself in both our desires as well as our action, because otherwise the system kind of goes out of whack. The energy center for that particular organ or for that particular system can start manifesting in ways that we now describe as maybe diseases or disorders of the human body.
Well, it is sad that we often lead our lives in ignorance and
Exactly.
unknowingly or knowingly put so much demand on our energy centers to the extent that we are creating pathological conditions for us, like you explained. Doctor, we'd like to understand if modern medicine historically has studied or tried to study any connection between the autonomic nervous system and the subtle system.
That's a great question, Monikaji. So, modern medicine, of course, has not really tried. In modern medicine, if we look at the Hippocratic tradition, certainly in the past tried to make that linkage, particularly through the time of Hippocrates. For example, Hippocrates was known to use methods that would bring the systems into balance. But Galen, who succeeded Hippocrates for about 1500 years, his theory of humors, 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 basically looked at trying to balance out these systems between hot and cold, like the subtle system sort of does, and then look at it from that point of view. So medicine had some, maybe in the distant past, an understanding of the need to maybe balance these elements within us. So that was one, and Galen's theory of humors dominated medicine till about the Renaissance and the arrival of the scientific method, the dissection of the human body, the understanding of physiologic mechanisms, and then we kind of lost it. So modern medicine doesn't really investigate it that much. In Ayurveda, it's probably become closest to bridging that gap between the subtle system and the autonomic nervous system, particularly through the Tridosha theory, which is the Kapha Pitta Vata theory, which basically looks at the body as a composition of 5 elements: earth, fire, water, ether, and air. So it is through the Tridosha theory, this tripartite theory, that we try to understand the relationship between the subtle system and the gross system. And Ayurveda tries to use these elements to bring the body into a state of balance. But that's as far as medical systems go. There are other systems of medicine. Chinese system tries to balance the yin and yang part of it. So medicine historically has had an understanding of it, but not to the extent maybe that Sahaj can provide.
Understood. So now that we understand that there are, these energy centers, let's begin by talking about the very first energy center. So could we understand a little bit about this and its role in human evolution as well as in spirituality?
Sure. So the first energy center is, it would not be an overstatement to say that it is hypercritical to understand it, because it truly is the beginning of it all. It is called as the Mooladhara Chakra. It sits outside of the vertebral column, just below it. It exists at an extremely subtle level. As we said, there is no way to sort of see these energy centers, but we can perceive them. So that chakra, Mooladhara, essentially means the primordial support. It really is the fulcrum of everything. Now, before we start to understand the Mooladhara Chakra, maybe just a step back into basic physics or quantum mechanics, if you will, or quantum field theory. Why is that important? It's very important because if you remember, in 2012, the CERN particle collider essentially found the Higgs boson particle. Now, why was that important? Why was the Nobel Prize awarded to the individuals who had 40 years ago propounded that theory? And the reason is the existence of the Higgs field, which is supposed to permeate all known universe. And what the Higgs boson essentially proved was that energy somehow imparts properties to electromagnetic particles, or at that quantum level, in that quantum state, that essentially gives them mass. Mass, in turn, produces gravity, right? Basically, what is gravity? It's a curvature of space-time. So whatever mass you have, it leads to that part of gravity, and that is a constant, right? Newton essentially showed us that there is a constant in terms of gravity. Now, why is that important? This is important to know that energy preceded the creation of matter. And that helps us to understand our subtle system and also our chakras. So basically, the Mooladhara Chakra, or the first energy center, represents that first primordial step after the Big Bang, or around that time, or just following that, as this heat was released. And then that heat essentially started slowly, as the system started coalescing. We had the formation of the big stars, and within the cores of these big stars, you had fusion reactions where hydrogen and helium nuclei started coming together and elements were formed. And a key element was carbon. And carbon, as we know, is tetravalent. It has 4 valencies, and it is the basic molecule that leads to formation of organic compounds. And the human being, basically, or everything that we see around us, animals, plants, whatever, is essentially a product of that organic chemistry. So this element, carbon, which has 4 valencies, is also interestingly represented in some ways as the swastika, which is a very traditional ancient symbol. Unfortunately, in the last century, it got a very bad reputation, but it has nothing to do with it. It has been recognized as a symbol of auspiciousness and purity, and everything that goes with it. So that is how it starts. So this is the Muladhara Chakra. The Muladhara Chakra is the fulcrum, literally the support of the entire system, and it is governed by an aspect of divinity whose manifestation is primordial innocence. So once again, to recap, you have energy, that is the primordial energy, that somehow imparted its properties to electromagnetic whatever particles that created mass, and that mass led to gravity. So, and without gravity we would not have existed, because otherwise we would have just been like electrons spinning forever at the speed of light. And that gravity is also kept at a very specific constant, because if that constant were to be little less or little more, if it were more than what it currently exists, we would have just collapsed together into dense, a hyper dense kind of matter that would be impossible to define, or if it had been less, we would have just been flying into space. So Muladhara Chakra is very important because it represents that primordial purity of the power that essentially created us. And at the gross level, it is represented by the pelvic plexus. The pelvic plexus is formed by nerves that come out of our sacrum bone, and as well as the last parts of the lumbar vertebra. They come together, they exist on both sides, and the pelvic plexus essentially innervate the excretory organs as well as the reproductive organs in the human body, in males as well as females, as the animation that you can see essentially shows. So for example, basically, the uterus or the urinary bladder, the excretory organs, those are the organs that are controlled. Again, the word control is used in a spiritual sense, not just in a physical sense, by the pelvic plexus. The pelvic plexus, there are two of them on either side of the vertebral column at the lower part of the body, lower pelvis. That's why it's called the pelvic plexus, and that's how they control these organs. But the power that controls the plexuses is represented by the Muladhara Chakra. Once again, before we end this question, again to re-emphasize what we said in answer to a previous question, the Muladhara Chakra essentially should not be looked at in a unitary fashion. It is to be seen as part of an integral system that literally sits above it, but the Muladhara Chakra essentially provides the support to it all. And its main function is to provide gravity, and through that gravity, it allows the support of the entire system. It is an extraordinarily important energy center to be aware of.
All right. And then you mentioned two things. You mentioned the sacrum bone, and we'd like to understand, why it is considered relevant in this context. You also mentioned primordial energy. Now, is this the same as the Kundalini energy that we hear about? And, what is this Kundalini energy and what role does it play in human spirituality?
Amazing. So that is indeed true. So once again, as we look at the graphics, we look at the animation, we see that at the bottom of the vertebral column is a triangular bone called as the os sacrum. The Greeks basically realized that this was a very sacred place. And there is no reason to know, so far as we know, why would they call it that particular bone. There are theories about it. It is said that is amongst the last bones to be destroyed in the human body if a body is interred or is buried. It is an extremely strong bone. It looks like the hood of a snake, and within this os sacrum, and this is why we believe in human spirituality, resides the primordial energy in kind of 3.5 coils, in the kind of a serpentine coils, and that energy is referred to in the Yoga Sutras or in classical Sanskrit texts as Kundalini. Kundala means essentially coiled, and it sits there in 3.5 coils. Now, other texts refer to it as the serpent power, or that power that resides within us. It is very interesting that the ancient Greeks used to worship a god called Aesculapius. And Aesculapius was known to cure diseases with the use of serpent power. So even now, if you look at most of the most visible symbol of most physician or medical societies is you see a staff and you see two serpents kind of coiled around it, and that comes from the legend of Asclepius, who was believed to cure diseases using serpent power. So this is this energy that resides within us. This is the energy that allows us to raise our consciousness from a human level to a level whereby we can perceive this existential reality that is absolute, that we referred to in one of our previous episodes. The sympathetic nervous system basically has nerves that permeate each part of our body, including our nerves. And when this energy is awakened within us, as it rises through the other energy centers, which we will talk about in subsequent episodes, and it arrives and it pierces through the limbic system, the fontanel area in that part of the brain, it allows us to feel that energy around us that we otherwise cannot at a sensory level, and that is very important. At a biological level, it's very interesting that to some extent is probably not the Kundalini energy per se, but the Kundalini energy, the fact that it allows our evolution, bears an interesting parallel to the double helical structure of the DNA molecule. The DNA molecule, which exists within every cell and essentially is the fundamental unit of all living organisms in every cell, consists of two strands that kind of spiral around each other. One goes up, one kind of goes down, and it contains the genetic code within itself. And the reason why, as the founder of Sahaja Shri Mataji once explained, it is helical, is because a helical movement allows you, if you move it, to arrive at a higher plane. Circular movement allows you to only come back to the starting point. But a helical movement allows you to rise. That's why you have a spiral staircase. So in kind of analogous fashion, the Kundalini energy allows us, when it uncoils and as it rises, to raise our consciousness. So this is present in every human being, and it is also called the mother energy. It is kind of your individual mother, because this is the energy that knows the best what is good for you, what is best for you. And this energy it's a female energy that resides within each one of us, dormant in the sacrum, and it is the awakening of this energy which is the ultimate object of all yoga practices. In fact, yoga is defined as the awakening of this energy, and it's piercing through the fontanel area and awakening of the limbic system. So that's the Kundalini energy which resides in the sacrum, and which certain systems of medicine, particularly in the past, were kind of aware of, but it is extraordinarily challenging to awaken that energy, to make it uncoil itself and rise through the Sushumna Nadi, which at a subtle level at the gross level is represented by the parasympathetic nervous system.
So you mentioned every human being has this energy, and you also mentioned that this energy helps us raise our consciousness. So I guess my question is then, why does every human being not evolve, up to a certain level of consciousness? Why is that difference?
That's again a wonderful question. The reason is that this energy is a power that can be awakened or is awakened only through the grace of a master. And unless and until there is a master who has the quote unquote the authority or the ability to awaken it, this energy does not rise. This energy, let's just say, has a mind of its own. That is because it is of divine origin. It is divinity personified within a human being, and that cannot be raised. That cannot come up. It doesn't uncoil itself and start rising just because somebody wants it to be so. It has to happen, or it can only happen if that said individual, comes in contact with a person who is a master and whose own energy is awakened to a state that can then allow for that other individual who doesn't have it awakened to be able to be awakened. We call it having a guru. It's a kind of a traditional way of saying it, but it is only through the grace of the guru, of a true guru, a primordial, a person who is truly a true master who has nothing but pure benevolence in his or her heart towards this other individual can facilitate the awakening of this inner energy, which is very, very relatively straightforward in Sahaj, but that experience we can have after this session as the session that is led by Shri Mataji herself.
Right. And that's what I was going to say. I think it is, on that note, perfect time for our audiences to have that experience and then, just follow the instructions that the founder has. Because like you mentioned, there has to be some expert or guru who has to be able to do this for you. And I would like to thank you, Dr. Ashish, for your time today. And we look forward to talking to you again on, the next energy center in our subtle system. But thanks again for your time today.
Thank you very much. Great questions. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoys the meditation session as well.
Yes, we do hope that.
At the Muladhara chakra, this manifests the pelvic plexus outside. Now this center is placed below the Kundalini, which is placed in the sacrum bone. This is called as sacrum because it is a sacred bone. In this bone lies the Kundalini, the residual power of our germination. During the process of Kundalini awakening, you can see the pulsation down here. You can also, through stethoscope, see the rising of the Kundalini and you can see the pulsation in the backbone. Till it reaches here in the fontanelle bone area where it breaks through. At that point, you do not feel any pulsation. As soon as this happens, from your hands, a cool breeze starts flowing. You can feel it on your fingers, as shown here. These are the terminal points of the sympathetic nervous system within us. These represent all the centers that are inside us. And you start feeling them on your fingers as absolutely your own experience. Keep your eyes closed. First of all, please put your right hand on your heart. All the time the left hand is towards me. Now, here you have to say, in your heart, with all sincerity, Mother, am I the spirit? Ask the question 3 times in your heart. This is a very fundamental question. Now bring the right hand on to the left hand side of your stomach, in the upper part. Here press it. Now this is the center of your mastery, your guidance, your Guru Tattva as they say. So ask a question, Mother, am I my own master? This is a question to be asked 3 times. Mother, am I my own master? Now, bring your right hand down below, in the lower part of the abdomen. Now, this is the center from which all the divine work is done. All the pure work is done. So to ask 6 times, because this center has got 6 petals. Mother, please give me pure knowledge. 6 times you just ask. As a result of this asking, the Kundalini starts getting awakened. Now to help the Kundalini rise, you have to cooperate with her. So please put your right hand on the left hand side in the upper part of your abdomen and press it on the stomach. Now here you have to say with full confidence, to help the Kundalini to rise, Mother, I am my own master. This you have to say 10 times. These are the 10 commandments which you have to say. That, Mother, I am my own master. Now, 10 times with full confidence. Now, please raise your right hand to your heart. Now, here you have to say, again with full confidence, Mother, I am the Spirit. This is the truth. You are the Spirit. But you have to say with full confidence, Mother, I am the Spirit. This you have to say 12 times. Now one has to know that God Almighty is the ocean of love. But above all, He is the ocean of forgiveness. So He forgives. Whatever wrong you do, He forgives. So don't feel guilty and put your right hand across. On the left hand side, in the corner which is made by your neck and your shoulder. Now here you have to say, again with full confidence, 16 times, Mother, I am not guilty. Please say it. Mother, I am not guilty. 16 times. I am not guilty at all. Please say it. Please say it. Now raise your hand across on your forehead. And it's a very important center. Here you have to say from your heart, Mother, I forgive everyone. Please say it from your heart. How many times is not the point. Mother, I forgive everyone. Now some would say that it's very difficult to forgive. But it's a myth that we do not forgive or we forgive. We do not do anything in both the cases. But if we don't forgive, then we play into wrong hands. So please say from your heart, Mother, I forgive everyone. Now please take your hand on the back agya, the same center, on the back side of your head and allow your head to rest on it and push it back a little bit. Now here, you have to say for your satisfaction, because you always feel guilty, that, "Oh Divine, if I have done anything wrong, please forgive me." Please forgive me. From your heart. Stretch your hand fully and put your center of your palm on top of the fontanelle bone area, which was a very soft bone in your childhood. Press it hard. Press hard your scalp. Now you have to move it 7 times, saying one thing, which you have to ask for: "Mother, please give us my self-realization," because I cannot force on you. So you have to ask for it. 7 times, press it hard and move it 7 times, very hard. Slowly, saying that.